Welcome to Lynn Cullen Live. Talk radio without the static. Email your questions and comments to lynncullenshow@gmail.com. And now your host, Lynn Cullen.
Hello there, and welcome to Groundhog Day, I guess. An absurd holiday where a rodent is tortured, pulled out of hibernation earlier than he wants to. Anyway, big shock. The groundhog said 6 more weeks of winter. I could have told you the same thing by looking at a calendar. Really sort of amazing that Punxsutawney managed to spin this nonsense into what I suspect is the largest revenue producer in that town. That's just unbelievable. Nuts. All right. So the front page of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette today, in a story about the big local story, which would be the disappearance of a bridge that many of us took on a regular basis, had the most amazing sentence in it. It just made me stop in my tracks. Never mind that I was reading it lying in bed, so I wasn't going anywhere. The lead of the story, the lead story, is that PennDOT is going to use a federal grant of $25 million to repair the bridge. But the first sentence says it's too soon, though, to say how long it will take to build the new structure. And here's the one that made me go, wow. And that's because supply chain problems have made steel beams and other construction supplies difficult to obtain. Anyone else see some extraordinary irony in that statement? For want of steel, a Pittsburgh bridge will not be able to be done as quickly as we hope for want of steel beams. That's why all these stories are calling us the city of bridges. Remember when we used to be the city of steel? We were Steel City. Well, yeah, because our steel is responsible for bridges and skyscrapers and everything all over the country. And for want of a steel beam, Pittsburghers wait. I just found that incredible. Here's another thing I find incredible. So the Washington football team, formerly known as the Redskins, there's nothing racist about that. The Washington football team has chosen a new name. And I don't care what you think about it. All these names sound stupid initially, and then the Washington Commanders. Okay, but did anybody think, and they already have the uniforms, the logos, all of this. Did anybody ever bring up in a discussion, this had to involve many meetings, many discussions, that the Washington Commanders could really be easily, nicknames come into a team's name, right? The Washington, what do you do with Commander? The Washington Commies. I'm just saying. Maybe they should have a hammer and a sickle on the side of their helmets. The Washington Commies. saying. All right. Those are two of my great thoughts for today. And then I came on this, and perhaps you have seen this too. Unbelievable. As we were talking before about, whoever controls the present controls the past. And that's where we're seeing all of this historic revisionism on the part of America's new fascist party, the Republicans. And all over this country, there are states passing laws, you know this, that would ban the teaching of anything that would make a white child feel uncomfortable. The amount of stupidity on the right is I can't think of the word that would give what I want to say. The superlatives are. It's just. Here's the latest. This Republican congressman from Kentucky, Thomas Massey, wanting to deride Dr. Fauci, claimed to quote Voltaire. Voltaire, 18th century philosopher, writer. Problem is, the quote he attributed to Voltaire did not come from him. The quote came from a neo-Nazi pedophile. Now, I learned all this from Dana Milbank's column in the Washington Post today. And he says, this kind of thing coming from a Republican in power is nothing unusual. And historical revisionism is all over the place if the place is governed by Republicans. There are more than 10 states, I guess, or is it at 10 states now, that already have bills or they're in the works prohibiting public schools from making children feel discomfort. I don't think they ever spell out white children, but they say because of their race or something. And we talked about this yesterday because the reality is that children from minority groups have, learned to live with discomfort. God knows, living in a majoritarian white ruled nation. So in Virginia, there even is a tip line, and I think that's true in some other states, where distraught parents can call the tip line and report teachers who are teaching things that make children feel unhappy. Well, Dana Milbank said, so imagine, let's try to teach about slavery. There's no way they can erase it. Slavery happened. And ultimately, what do these folks want history books to teach about slavery? And Dana Milbank said there's no problem figuring that out because, well, a lot of us were educated with those books. And then he just quotes from a 7th grade textbook used in Virginia's public schools all the way through the 1970s. 50s through the 70s. So I lived in Virginia. That would have been my history book about slavery. And here's what I would have learned. These are all verbatim excerpts from a book called Virginia, History, Government, Geography. Okay? Get ready. Here we go. A feeling of strong affection existed between masters and slaves in a majority of Virginia homes. It was in the master's own interest to keep his slaves contented and in good health. If he treated them well, he would win their loyalty and cooperation. The intelligent master found it profitable to discover and develop the talents and abilities of each slave. The more progressive planters tried to promote loyalty and love of work using gifts and awards. Many of the Negroes were taught to read and write. Many of them were allowed to meet in groups for preaching, for funerals, and for singing and dancing. They went visiting at night and sometimes owned guns. Most of them were treated with kindness. The tasks of each house slave were light. They learned much about the finer things of life. The house servants took a great deal of pride in their comfortable positions. The field hands were given a rest period at noon, usually from 1 to 3 hours. Those who were too old or too sick to work in the fields were not forced to do so. They were given free hours. The planter often kept a close eye upon the overseer to see that the slaves were not overworked or badly treated. Each slave was given a weekly ration consisting of 3 or 4 pounds of pork and plenty of cornmeal and molasses. To this food were added the vegetables, fruits, hogs, and chickens, which the slaves were allowed to raise for themselves. And when a slave was sick, food was often carried to him from the master's table. Male field hands received each year 2 summer suits, 2 winter suits, a straw hat, a wool hat, and 2 pairs of shoes. Often the members of the master's family would hand down to their favorite slaves clothing which they no longer needed. The slaves loved finery. I'm sure you're choking too. Every effort was made to protect the health of the slaves. It was the duty of all mistresses to give sick slaves the same care they gave their own children. This is what kids in Virginia were taught up until 1980. The house servants became almost as much a part of the planter's family circle as its white members. A strong tie existed between slave and master because each was dependent on the other. The regard that master and slave had for each other made plantation life happy, prosperous. The slaves liked Virginia food, Virginia climate, and Virginia way of living. Those Negroes who had gone to Liberia were homesick. Many longed to get back to the plantation. It must be remembered that Virginia was a home as much beloved by most of its Negroes as by its white people. Negroes did not wish to leave their old masters. Yeah. Well, I wonder how do they explain this? Life among the Negroes of Virginia in slavery times was generally happy. The Negroes, oh, shut up! Oh, God. Life among the Negroes of Virginia in slavery times was generally happy. the Negroes went about in a cheerful manner, making a living for themselves and for those for whom they worked. I can't get that off. I'm sorry. They were not worried by the furious arguments going on between Northerners and Southerners over what should be done with them. The Negroes remained loyal to their white mistresses even after President Lincoln promised in his Emancipation Proclamation that the slaves would be freed. And that is it. Okay, I'm going to try to shut this up. Shut the up. Stop it. Stop it. Stop it. Stop it. Stop. Stop. I can't. I don't even know how. Just go away. Go away. Go away. Go away. I'm sorry. You got a cheap thing and I don't know how to shut it up. Okay. So there it is. Isn't that amazing? There it is. There's no need to wonder where this is going. We've been there. And we've been there, not too long ago, relatively recently. That history is just unbelievable bullshit. But for the tender, snowflakey, little white people, I guess they would not feel any hurt when they learned that history. No. Oh, you cannot make it up. Oh, man. What? I didn't even know about this. Bob says, what are your thoughts on the Roberto Clemente Bridge closing down for a couple of pirate seasons? They're closing the Roberto Clemente Bridge? Didn't they just sort of redo that thing? Wasn't it closed relatively recently? Oh, or is it the next one up? They did Rachel Carson, they did Warhol, and now it's time for Roberto. Is that it? I think they're just working their way up the those bridges on the Allegheny. I don't know. Who goes to pirate games anyway? They don't need the bridge. Oh, God. Somebody asked the other day about political ads. Oh, my God, are we seeing some? Who was that? Somebody asked, and I saw it. A guy named what? Dan White or something? He's running for what? Governor? Republican? He's a Republican going for the governor or the... And oh my God, it's going to be horrific. Look at when it is. It's February, the beginning of February. And you're assaulted with, these god-awful McDonald ads and Dr. Oz. And then the two of them going at each other, trying to, make the other seem like as bad a person as they really are. I hope they take each other down. God, what horrible human beings. What a grotesque way to run an election, to gain power. But somebody said, do the ads have to be true? Or can somebody literally say anything they will please? And I had said, I believe in a political ad, truth is not required. And I don't know. There are truth in advertising laws, but those laws apply to to products and to services. Now, granted, the way we do politics is the politician is reduced to a product, a brand, and then marketed to us. But that's not the way the, I guess, FCC or the FTC might be. Yeah. Because it is the FTC that requires ads to be truthful. Oh, God. But truth in advertising laws do not apply to political ads. And that's because our Supreme Court has distinguished commercial speech, that'd be the speech about stuff you buy, from political speech. And let me get it's all because political speech is entitled to the greatest First Amendment protection. This is why my adjective of choice for the First Amendment is always to precede it with the adjective pesky. That pesky First Amendment, I'll tell you. Look what it has done to us. It says that anybody wanting you to trust them in a position of great power that will have impact on the lives of you and your family and your community, well, they don't have to tell you the truth. Lord. Debate on public issues, they believe, should always be wide open and robust. How about putrid? Now, it could be that if you flat out said something defamatory about somebody that could not be proved, that the other person could bring a suit, but no, there's nothing. Nothing. The Supreme Court says somebody says something, says you're a criminal or a pedophile or whatever, well, the way you get at that is more speech, more lies, okay? So there you have it. No, and just batten down the hatches. It's going to get unbearable. He's going to get unbearable. I had a thought after seeing a report on the bomb threats being called in to these historically black colleges and universities with the intent, obviously, of terrorizing those communities and intimidating them and just upending their lives. And it's pretty damn easy to do. You pick up a phone and you call. And even though the presumption is that these calls are nothing more than idle threats with the intent of disruption, that generally there is no bomb, you can't not act as if there may be. So I don't know. I mean, I'm sure the feds are on this. Everybody's on it, but it just takes one, and then even if that one got caught, another one could start up. I don't know what you do. There was a similar spate of these things. Remember, years ago, they were targeting Jewish institutions. I know the JCC and some Jewish preschools were getting these calls. It's the same crowd. And when I thought of that, I thought, the people doing this, these domestic terrorists, we know who they target. And it occurs to me that the groups that they target really need to start having conversations, and serious conversations, about working together. Since the playbook that this Republican Fascist Party is going by is pretty much the same playbook we saw play out in Germany they're targeting the same people. So, blacks, Jews, gays, immigrants, Muslims, socialists. It's the same group of enemies that fascists always go for. And we got them all here. Here we are. And those groups often are at each other's throats. And that's got to stop. Because we need a real coalition. And I know there are sort of nascent forms of this that already exist. But the domestic terrorists are coming. We know who they're coming for. And it's not just blacks, and it's not just Jews or Muslims or immigrants or gays or lefties. All of us. All of us. And I sure would like to see a lot more organizing going on. You know, that lefty term intersectionality. I really think we need to start seeing some serious coalition building, intersectionality between these groups who are no strangers to intimidation and terror. Historically black colleges and university, yeah, and historically marginalized and terrorized populations. These are allies now. These have got to be allies now. And we need to see, I don't know, I'm too old and I'm not an organizer. I'm not. I'm a squawker. Those people who have these skills and capacities, this is what needs to happen. And we need to reach out to each other. Because the domestic terrorists hate us all. Oh, dear. John says, as a Christian, the story of the Passion of Christ makes me feel bad. Where'd this come from? Yeah. All the flogging, the crowning of thorns, the crucifixion, etc. As such, I won't be going to Stations of the Cross services on Good Friday or Mass on Holy Saturday. Perhaps I'll go to Easter Sunday services about halfway through when the good news of the resurrection is, oh, I get it. I'm sorry, I was slow. When the good news of the resurrection is conveyed. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I just didn't know where you were going there, John. You're talking about only wanting to know the good history. Yeah, that's well done. Yeah, because it is. The Passion of the Christ. My God, the crucifixion. God, it makes you uncomfortable. I have a story actually of a true story of my great aunt. Faye Cohen, who was hospitalized, even though she lived in the Chicago area. At one point, she was hospitalized while visiting us in Green Bay. And she was taken to the hospital where my father was on the board at the time, St. Vincent's Hospital. And it was headed by this smart old feisty nun who really opened my dad's eyes to what that women, actually, it was the first time he dealt with a woman in a position of power and control. And he was blown away by how good she was at it. And it occurs to me that she didn't have any intention of being a feminist, but she had, that was the impact she had on all the men that she regularly dealt with. That's a really interesting topic in general, how these nuns who ran huge institutions were the first women that were in those kinds of positions and showed how women were perfectly capable. But I digress. So my Aunt Faye was taken to St. Vincent's and put in a room. And she was a former actress, actually. Very dramatic. Very dramatic. She had actually, as a very young woman, had toured with Edgar Bergen and, Candace Bergen's father, Edgar Bergen and his puppet, Charlie McCarthy. For some of his skits, he needed like a pretty girl to come in and be a nurse or a whatever. Yeah, whatever. And Faye had that experience for a little bit. And she's lying in the bed in the hospital in Green Bay. And because it's a Catholic hospital, there's a crucifix. There's a Jesus on the cross on the wall, right the wall that she would be looking at while lying in bed. And she was there because she had a very bad back, and she was in a great deal of pain. And apparently, when my mother went to see her, this is her aunt, she was screaming and carrying on to get somebody to get that thing off the wall. And my mother's trying to calm her down. Faye, you cannot. It's a Catholic hospital. That's Jesus. You cannot tell them to get it off the wall. Somebody, she said, and this is what I always remember, somebody has to remove that writhing figure from my line of vision. I am in enough pain. So, yeah, the crucifixion had that same impact on my aunt. It caused her great pain. And I'm not sure who had the idea. Maybe it was my mother. I don't know, and I guess they let it go. He never got taken off, but I do believe my mom draped a napkin over the writhing figure of Jesus. All right, so we got an update on the monkeys. Do you ever feel? I used to be Florida. They had all these crazy stories, and now the overturned monkeys on the road. It's such a horrible. I can't stand the story because those poor monkeys. Boy, that was about 11 days ago, and now there's a big story in the New York Times about it because stuff keeps happening as a result of the monkeys, the truck carrying them getting in a car accident, and the monkeys come spilling out. And it turns out that a woman named Michelle Fallon lives in Danville. That's where the accident happened. And she was on her way home, and she came upon the accident, and she pulled over, being a good person, wondering if she could help anybody. And she ran over. So she said there were crates that were strewn all over the roadway. And someone who was already there said he'd heard that there were like cats inside. She thought, cats? So she got closer and stuck her finger in one of the crates, and she saw brown fur. And then she said it made a weird noise, unlike any cat she had ever heard. And so she put her face really close to see if she could get a better look. And that's when she saw, that ain't no cat. That's a monkey. And that's when the monkey made this hissing sound. And she said she felt a mist hit her face. So there was an exchange there. And she pulled away. What a day she had. So after getting spit on by a distressed monkey, she then went to a party that night and found out the next day that some of the people at the party had tested positive for COVID. And she said, so I ran out and got tested, but I was negative, but I was not feeling well. She said she was queasy, and one of her eyes had like some kind of a crust on it, and she had a cough. And she said, all in all, it was like the worst day of my life. And then some doctors find out that a woman who came in contact with the monkeys is not feeling well, but doesn't have COVID, even though she was the word exposed. God damn, I hate this shriveling up brain. Anyway, so Michelle Fallon, there's concern that monkeys might transmit. Actually, the monkeys were not on the way to a laboratory. They were on their way to a quarantine facility, which is what happens when monkeys or any animal is brought into the United States from abroad. Then they have to go and quarantine. So the monkeys were on their way to a quarantine facility, so it wasn't known if any of them may have had a kind of monkey disease that could in fact be passed on to a human, because a direct exposure to monkey saliva could be dangerous. So Michelle Fallon has been given rabies vaccine. She's been given antiviral medication. She's been given antibiotic eye drops. She's they're throwing the book at her. They haven't found anything yet. Anyway, so I just wanted to tell you that that's an update, as is the fact that the airline that flew the monkeys to this country, Kenya Airlines, has said they will no longer transport animals that are to be used in medical experiments. And that follows all the airlines. The American carriers won't do it either, which is why Kenya Airlines was doing it. And more and more, it's getting harder to get these monkeys from where they came, where they thought their home was, which is Mauritius, the Indian Ocean, I think. Anyway, there's that. And then the other thing is, some monkeys escaped, and I never quite heard what happened. What happened is, well, here's what happened. The Centers for Disease Control said the monkeys were quickly found and humanely euthanized. That's what they said. However, I happen to know they were shot. Is that considered humane euthanization? They were shot. They didn't even try to capture them. They were just killed, gunned down. Oh, God. So anyway, that's the rest of that. What else I have? Barbara is saying, did you read Colson Whitehead's Underground Railroad? Yeah, because it's going to make it onto the banned books list. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Actually, I'm just starting Colson Whitehead's latest book, Harlem Shuffle. Barbara says that she attended his lecture when he came here at the Carnegie Music Hall. He, by the way, is widely believed to be maybe the greatest writer in the United States right now. And if you haven't read his stuff, you darn well should. He's won every award there is to win. I mean, and for a young man, I think he's relatively young, Colson Whitehead. He's won the Pulitzer twice. He's won the National Book Award, the Andrew Carnegie Medal for Excellence, every award. I mean, every award. He's a MacArthur Genius Fellow, recipient of a Guggenheim Fellowship, a Library of Congress Prize. I mean, he's just the best. So anyway, the Underground Railroad and the Nickel Boys. I think those are the two for which he won the Pulitzer. I'm not sure. But Barbara says that when he lectured here at the Carnegie Music Hall, the audience laughed when he told them that someone had commented on his book, The Underground Railroad, and complained that it was depressing. Yeah, I guess. Oh, God. They were triggered. Oh. Well, let's see. What else we got here? I wanted to make you feel a little bit better about something, about are we heading toward this horrific Republican huge win this year in the midterms and the loss of control of the House. And Senate really don't control. Looks like Mitch McConnell still controls that. But anytime you read any story now, it's like Democrats are doomed. Polls show Americans miserable, unhappy, pissed off. And whenever there's an election and that happens, they throw everybody out, especially people who are in the governing party. And Republicans are absolutely sure that this inflation and the misery of the pandemic is going to propel them back into complete control of the Congress. And they only have to pick up, I hate to tell you this, they only have to pick up one Senate seat while holding the ones they have, and 6 House seats. And if this is anything like any normal midterm election, man, that's so doable, it's a joke. So stop and think what that means. That means the January 6th committee won't exist anymore. That means they'll be in control of setting up committees and investigations. And if we're to believe them, and why not, they're very open about their nefarious. How can you be open about your nefarious conduct? They intend to impeach the president just because. But there is a piece in the Times saying, everybody just hold on for a little bit, because it could well be that by this summer, Americans are living their lives pretty much as they used to. And come the summer, inflation might well down, supply chain issues better, shelves full, and people won't be as upset as they are now. Schools in September will open up, and it'll be normal. I mean, that's, of course, if no other variant comes rolling down. It's just keep in mind that. And so the way that Democrats hold is they've got to get out their voters. Now, that's not easy to do when it's a midterm, because, in order to defeat Trump last time, you had to have Trump at the top of the ballot. He was the greatest motivator that the Democratic voters had. Get him out. And for some reason, voters are not as, they just don't think past something that obvious. That you wouldn't want anybody who thought Donald Trump had lost the election. Well, you wouldn't want anybody in this new fascist party to have power. But I guess voters just don't. So the Democrats have to do something that is unbelievable. Now, one thing that would help that is if the Supreme Court, in fact, overturned Roe v. Wade. And my gut tells me that because the court knows that they'll pretty much do it, but not quite. I don't know, because they won't want to give that political advantage to the Democrats. I don't know, but that's a possibility. Things could be looking better. American mood could be better. Certain things could happen that will, in fact, make Democratic voters very riled up. There could be Roe. There could be Republicans doing even more outrageous, fascistic things. There could be Trump, God bless him, insinuating himself more and more, as he seems to be doing, and thus awakening the slumbering Democratic majority voters to the continuing threat. So I just wanted to pass that on in case it made anybody feel better. Okay? I'm looking. There was this article I read that I remember once when I used to take the bus. I used to take the bus to the studio downtown, and I pretty much loved it. Because I loved. First of all, is the quickest way to get downtown there is on the busway. You're there. And I also sort of loved being with people that I otherwise wouldn't have been. Regular Pittsburgh bus riding kind of people. And I would overhear conversations. And it amazed me how so often I would hear that someone on the bus was going down because they had a court date. And often the court date and what they were talking about was something that wouldn't have happened if they had a little money. Remember this one story where some guy had to do with his checking account, and he had this checking account and he overdrew it, and then he got a this and a that, and he ended up he sort of ended up, underwater in a hole, and he had no resources to get himself out. Somehow he ends up in a court. And I was thinking, when you're poor, you are just one little unexpected thing away from potentially just going down. And so many people live like that. And when you're poor, the way our economy works, it works to keep you poor. And I read a seemingly, dull piece about light bulbs and how if you're poor and you shop at a dollar store, the dollar stores, the low-end retailers, when they sell light bulbs, they're selling those old, traditional, halogen, incandescent. They're not selling LEDs. Now, LEDs tend to be more expensive. But if you buy the old ones, they don't last as long. They are not energy savers. They're energy gobblers. Your electric bill is higher, and you keep buying more and more. Whereas if a poor person had access to buying an LED light, and they're often less available in areas that have just these low-end retailers, they would be in better shape. A 60-watt incandescent bulb uses as much as 12 times the electricity of a 5-watt LED. And they provide the same amount of light. And that LED light will last longer. Something that small. A poor person spends more to light their home because they don't have access, because they buy the cheapest thing. And that's and the cheapest thing is not energy efficient. Lighting accounts for as much as a fifth of the average American household's electricity bill. And if you're poor, your household is spending a disproportionately large part of your income on utilities. And for a reason as simple as that. You think of all the ways the poor people are kept poor. They get a paycheck. They don't have a banking account. Why should they have a banking account? They live paycheck to paycheck. They can't have a banking account. So they go to the cash checking place, and they cash their earnings. But the cash checking place takes some of those earnings for just having it cashed. Does that happen to you? No. I once had a car owed. This is a day I didn't take the damn bus downtown. I took my car, I parked it on Smithfield. And I parked it legally. I'd parked there a number of times. When I left, when the show was over, my car was gone. I thought it was stolen. I called the cops. The cops said, "Did you call the tow pound?" I said, "Why would I call the tow pound? It was legally parked." Call the tow pound, they said. You never know. I called the tow pound, and damn if they didn't have my car, which had been legally parked. There was nothing I could do about that, apparently. I had to then get an Uber to take me to the tow pound. There was money. And then at the tow pound, I paid a ridiculous sum of money to get my car back. And I have to tell you, if I were a poor person, I would not have been able to get my car back. I would not have. And I told the guy at the tow pound, he said, well, you gotta, there's a ticket here too, and you're being charged all this for the ticket, as well as charged by the tow pound. And so obviously I appealed. I appealed it. I had pictures. I had everything. I had little doubt I would get my money back. However, so if you're poor and that happens to you, and let's say you have this old car that you drive, and it's your only way to get to work, you lose your car, you can't go to work anymore. It just seems that no matter what, we make it impossible for poor people to ever climb out of the hole they're in. We just keep greasing the ladder. Rent to own. God, what a scam. They end up paying more for a piece of furniture or a television than you ever would. Rich people don't pay what poor people pay. Barbara is saying she doesn't think the word is that the whole system works to keep the poor poor. She says she thinks the proper word, punish. Which takes me to this unbearable story about UPMC. Maybe you had read it. This is from a few weeks ago. It says that if you're a low wage employee at UPMC, and man, there's thousands of them. Let's say you get sick. Let's say you break a leg. Let's say you need the help, medical help of your employer. You carry UPMC insurance. You work for them, you carry their insurance, and they're your medical provider. And guess what? There are so many low-wage people at UPMC that owe UPMC thousands for medical care. Because the insurance that UPMC gives them is not up to covering, copay, this, that, and the other, and they can't do it. And it is so grotesque. Someone who is a consultant on medical stuff says this is a perfect microcosm of all the issues of healthcare pricing. Here you got this mammoth UPMC reaping hundreds of millions of dollars in profits annually, holding billions in reserve. And yet it has its own employees owing it money for care in their own hospital. Classic textbook case of everything that is wrong with hospital financing. I mean, what you have here, if you have an employer, generally speaking, the employer is not also the insurance company, is not also the hospital. But if you work for UPMC, you got this trifecta. You work for them, you need them for medical care, and you carry their insurance. And if the hospital is also the insurer, well, it's basically negotiating with itself. Other employers try to lower their prices. UPMC's got all these things that are pulling it and why? Why should they lower prices? They're the insurer. Wait, you see, no matter which way you come at it, it's insane. I'm looking at a picture of a woman who's worked at the UPMC Presby for a long, long time, and she just retired. And she owes them more than $4,000. You imagine you've retired and you owe your former employer $4,000. She carried their insurance. She worked for them. She received their measly paychecks. And she can't afford to pay him back. So much for a happy, stress-free retirement. Oh, man. The system exists, to punish the poor. All right, that's it for me. I didn't get to Pope Francis's playlist, damn it. Well, maybe tomorrow. Okay, you guys, run out quick. Get toilet paper, get everything. They're scaring us again. I don't know what's happening, but I'm going. Right after this, I'm going. So get out of my way. I got sharp elbows. Talk to you tomorrow.
Lynn Cullen Live, Monday through Thursday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. and archived at pghcitypaper.com. The opinions expressed on Lynn Cullen Live are those of the host and do not necessarily reflect the viewpoints of Pittsburgh City Paper or its advertisers.